Demons. That is the topic of today's gospel reading. Jesus meets a man who is possessed by demons that have caused him to live by the tombs naked and alone. But what are these demons? Some modern theologians argue that saying a person is possessed by demons is simply a way for the gospel writers to describe mental illness in a time before our modern understanding of it. Perhaps in some cases it was, but can actual demons, spirits working for evil, exist? Well, demon possession comes up not infrequently in the New Testament. Jesus is shown healing people from demons on 6 separate occasions, and some, like the story from today, that are listed in multiple Gospels. There's also a story from the book of Acts in which Paul heals a girl from demon possession. When Jesus sends out the 12 in Matthew chapter 10, he tells them, "Go and heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons." One can add to this a myriad of stories in modern times that speak of demons. A simple Google search will show articles of how exorcisms are on the rise in the U.S. If you read Joanne Shelter's book, And the Word Came with Power, you can find her experience with demons while she was doing missionary work. Joanne was a missionary to the Balango people of the Philippines, and much of Balango life revolved around keeping the spirits happy. The Balango people spent a great deal of time and resources to make sure the spirits were pleased with them, so that their families would be safe. In her book, Joanne describes the first time she saw a spirit possess someone. Joanne writes, "I'll never forget the first time Anne and I saw spirits possess someone. We hadn't been living in Botac long when little Agilpay contracted pneumonia. I'd given him an injection of penicillin, but the spirit, speaking through a medium, told the parents not to allow their son to have another injection. The third day his breathing was labored. It became precariously shallow and slow. He was gasping for air just 3 or 4 times a minute. Obviously, he couldn't last much longer. The old spirit medium was called and sacrifices were made. She called the spirits by name to come. She convulsed and shook, then stiff as a board, she passed out. They caught her as she fell over. People gathered around her, and when she came to, they started asking the spirits questions. What have we done? What do you want for payment? What do you want for sacrifice? Then the woman spoke in a male spirit's voice. The spirit simply wanted some pigs and chickens, so that they had made the boy sick to get his parents' attention. In exchange for the boy's life, they'd accept 3 pigs, 2 chickens, and some rice and wine and beads. The father was immensely relieved. He could meet the spirit's demands. The negotiations were finished, and with a violent wrenching, the spirits left the medium. Dazed, she grabbed her sore throat with one hand and her aching head with the other. The men scurried to kill the animals and offer their souls to the spirits. The dying child was well by the next day. I was dumbfounded. These spirits really do have power, I thought. It was the spookiest thing I'd ever seen. Small wonder that people argued against following God's way. If we stop sacrificing, what will we do when our children are sick? Just let them die? These spirits really do have power. That is the conclusion she reached. Thankfully, in time, she was able to bring the Balango people to God. But it was a battle, and spirits, the demons, put up a fight. In today's reading, the demons, named Legion, because they are so many, are not happy to see Jesus. A quick fun fact, a legion is about 6,000 men, so this man was possessed by a lot of demons. However, the demons knew that Jesus had power over them. It was never a question. They asked him to leave and not torment them, because they don't desire salvation and the good Jesus brings. They merely want to stay up and cause trouble on earth, rather than being sent back to the abyss or hell. They asked to go into the pigs, perhaps in an attempt to keep a hold on the unbelieving Gentiles, who would be more concerned for the loss of their material goods than in hearing the good news Jesus brings. And it works, at least at the time as they sent Jesus away. But Jesus, in turn, sends the demoniac back in order to serve as a missionary to his own people of the healing love of God. But wait a minute, we had 2 readings this morning. Now the question arises, how does this story of Jesus healing the demoniac tie in with Elijah? In reading the Interpreter Bible commentary on the Luke passage, a sentence leapt out that stated, "Frenzy is not the work of the Spirit of God, but the demons. It is the explosion of inner conflict, not the fruit of the spirit of peace." So in that regard, doesn't it make sense that God is not in the wind, earthquake, or fire, but is instead found in the silence? That while demons show up screaming and yelling, God silently slips in and changes the world. Now, of course, this is not to say that God cannot show up in a huge natural phenomenon. You only need to look a chapter earlier in 1 Kings to find God in the fire that helped Elijah defeat the priest of Baal. Or read Job 38, where God speaks to Job out of the whirlwind. God often shows up in a big way in order to get the attention of people. But his actions are never frenzied like the story of the demoniac. He often appears in a miraculous way in order to make way for the hearing of his word. Like a parent, he may shout to get his children's attention, but when he teaches them, he speaks in a calm way. Therefore, in the readings from 1 Kings, God chooses to come, not in a huge sign, but in a quiet moment, because he already has Elijah's attention, and he just needs him to hear the right words. As mentioned above, this passage made me think of the way a parent speaks to their children. I thought about God as our Father, and about how I want my Father to speak to me. Many of us want God's answers of what should be done to be shouted down and made abundantly clear in a loud, commanding voice. But that's often not how it comes. As I've been frustrated by this, I realize my kids don't behave any better or listen any more when I raise my voice. In fact, they often respond in a more positive manner when I slow down and talk to them in a calm way. While a shout might be necessary to get their attention or save them from injury, they will not fully appreciate the point I was making if I cannot explain it in a calm fashion. When we stop the chaos of the moment and step back for a quiet time of reflection. In 1 Kings, Elijah is whining like a petulant child, and no amount of yelling can help. But instead God comes in a sound of sheer silence. Many texts translate this as a still, small voice. Both are possible translations of the Hebrew, but personally, I like the sound of sheer silence. A silence so strong and powerful you can hear it. I imagine many of you can think of a moment when you were surrounded by a silence so powerful you can hear it. This is the type of moment in which God will often appear, even when we're not necessarily looking for him. It's amazing how powerful silence can be. I think of one moment in particular where I heard God in the silence and allowed him to lead me where I needed to go. I was working at Riverside Hospital in Newport News, Virginia as a chaplain in order to finish my Master's of Divinity. I was assigned the maternity ward, where most of the cases are happy times. But one day I got called up for a stillbirth. I was terrified. As I walked toward the elevator, my head was buzzing, trying to script out the encounter. My personality demands that I know exactly what I will say and do, because I worry that I'll do the wrong thing if I don't have a plan going in. But as I got on the elevator, I realized I was way over my head here. I don't know what to do. I just have to trust God to take control. So I took a deep breath and prayed for wisdom and the words this family needed to hear. To this day, I have no idea what I said to those people, but I do know that God was there. As I left, an older relative followed me and thanked me for the words I said. But I know that God was the one who helped that family, not me. But I had to let him, and I could not fear the sound of sheer silence that filled my head where words usually formed. I had to close out the frenzy of the world to make room for God's still small voice to be heard. That is something that can be incredibly hard to do, especially as the world around us is so noisy. But it's something that can truly change not only your life, but can impact those around you. By being willing to stop and listen for God's word, we can find the strength necessary to stand up and do what is right and best for those in our lives. And so I hope that in the weeks to come, you will have the opportunity to find God in the silence, and that you will be able to share your stories of how God has used you in a positive way in this frenzy